Well, we're here today to talk about the Legal Defence Fund, which is celebrating its 15th anniversary this year. The Christian Institute's been around for 30 years, but for half of that time, we've had the Legal Defence Fund. I was involved with Simon Calvert in running that for a couple of years, and then Sam for 13 years. You've come and run that. You've been a solicitor advocate before you came here in commercial practice. Mm-hmm. And Sam, a lot of people would be interested to know, what would you say would be the highlight of your work here at the CI?
Yes, so many cases to choose from, Colin. I think just a general point to start with, the highlight of my 13 years so far here has been the people I've worked with, the various Christians, very courageous people who have made a stand for gospel freedom in this country, have stood their ground, we've taken their cases to court, they've become names in newspapers, they've become people quoted in law reports, but at the end of the day, they are very special people. Many of them become very good friends. That's a great highlight. I think just looking at individual cases, the highlight of my time here has to be the Ashes Baking Company case, but no doubt at all about that. A very important case went to the Supreme Court. We won in 2018. But I think a highlight of my time here, simply because it was a case where the facts were incredibly simple, and it was a case that just got so much traction, I think, in the court of public opinion. All those visits to Northern Ireland, speaking to 2,500 Christians at the Waterfront Hall, and a case that became instantly recognisable in the press.
But there were lots of legal roadblocks in the way, weren't there, in that case?
It was certainly a difficult case on many levels. I think to start with, it was a case where I think from the outset people just assumed, because it had something to do with same-sex marriage, with sexual orientation, therefore it must be unlawful discrimination. And obviously 4 years later the Supreme Court says just because it has something to do with sexual orientation doesn't make it unlawful. But complex issues, novel issues to do with compelled speech, which we had to work very hard to make centre stage of the case, and which ultimately succeeded with the Supreme Court. And a case which, because it came from Northern Ireland, and where the court rules are somewhat different, it was a case which it was unlikely would ever end up in the Supreme Court, and just due to complex circumstances, sometimes things not always necessarily going right, we ended up in the Supreme Court and were able to overturn the decisions of lower courts. So a difficult case, but a very enjoyable one.
And a great precedent on compelled speech.
Indeed.
What was your most shocking case, though, would you say?
Shocking case, that would probably be, I think it would have to be the Ben and Sharon Vogelenzang case, the Liverpool hoteliers who got into a conversation over breakfast with a Muslim guest, got reported to Merseyside police, faced criminal charges for hate speech. That went to the Liverpool Magistrates Court. It was shocking on many levels, but I think it was a case where Merseyside police through their heavy guns in terms of hate crime officers, and just seeing two Christians who had really, all they sought to do was witness to their faith in a criminal dock, facing criminal charges. And at the end of a 2-day trial, just to see those charges dismissed, them being acquitted, just the sheer joy, the sheer relief of that outcome. So it was a shocking case which we've not seen the like of since.
And of all the cases you've done, which case would you think has influenced most people?
The Scottish named person case, another case which we took to the Supreme Court and won in 2016, that has directly influenced the most number of people, and it's quantifiable. This was a case where we challenged a Scottish government policy. We succeeded in through our win of a whole part of an act of the Scottish Parliament being repealed, and every child in Scotland who would have had a named person, a state guardian, other than their parents, suddenly not having such a person in their life. So directly affected an enormous number of people, and a very significant case as well.
And there was a lot of publicity about the problems with the named person scheme, wasn't there, which was very helpful to the legal proceedings, really.
It was, and just preparing for that case, travelling to all corners of Scotland, interviewing parents, and just seeing at first hand how intrusive the scheme was. just made it a more significant win when it came.
Now, Sam, you spend a lot of money. Every year, I think your legal bills are at least £312,000 on average. But sometimes it's £500,000 you've spent in 1 year. That was a record. How do you ensure good value for money?
Yes, well, I mean, we have to do that for the sake of our supporters. I've worked hard over many years building good relationships with outside lawyers, solicitors and barristers. The lawyers we work with know what we're about, what we want to achieve, the sort of arguments that we need to be pursued in the cases that we're running. Many of them are prepared to be flexible on fees, and we're able to negotiate very good fees with the barristers that we use. But just in terms of risk of cost orders, if we don't succeed on a case, we've got a good track record over the years of avoiding large cost orders against us, and that's just through arguing the public importance of the cases that we're working on. And we've seen some good outcomes where costs have either been capped or we've not received cost orders at all.
This is a very important point, isn't it? Because what you're saying is that when you lose, you have to pay the legal bills of the other side.
Yes.
So that's the big risk,
That's
isn't
the
it?
general principle. Yes,
yeah. So we have to have enough money in order to fight the case to pay the bills if we lose.
Yes, and we always prepare for the worst case scenario. So we're ready if that should happen. But as I say, we've managed to avoid significant cost orders.
Would you agree, though, sometimes we have to lose cases in order to eventually win them? I think we've fought a number of cases where we've lost.
Yes. Yes.
But actually they've helped in changing the law very gradually, very slowly.
Yes, I think probably a very good example of that is the Bideford Town Council Prayers case. There was a technical loss there which soon got overturned by legislation, but a case which stands as an important precedent, stating that the manifestation of Christian belief in the public square is not discriminatory. So at face value a loss, but in fact a win.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you're obviously not in the Supreme Court every day. What do you do most of the time?
Yes, well, I mean, the big cases obviously do involve an enormous amount of preparation, but much of my time is not working on those large cases, those significant cases. It's given the day-to-day advice, guidance to Christians, Christian organisations who contact us for support. So it can be given some very informal advice. It may be a street preacher, wants to know whether certain activities would be lawful. We can give guidance in that area. Or it may be something more formal. It may be a church seeking to do a particular activity, wants to know whether it's lawful within the Equality Act. I can give an opinion on that. And sometimes the opinions I can give will be a very much more formal legal opinion, which either I provide or I can involve senior counsel to get involved in that. So we're kept busy every day on many issues and cases which are very much below the radar.
Well, the great thing is to prevent cases happening in the future, isn't it? By getting those precedents, we actually help people down the line so that they are not sued and they don't get into trouble because there is freedom.
That's right. And I think the very large cases, we do provide that framework. We're seeking to provide that framework in which Christian freedoms flourish. But on the day-to-day casework, what we're seeking to do is avoid cases arising in the first place.
Yes. So although there's a lot of money being spent, it's actually on something very precious, which is gospel freedom. So thank you, Sam, for speaking to us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.